Thomas Mitchell had been working as a royal guard at Windsor Castle for 15 years. Every morning he walked the same halls, checked the same rooms, and followed the same security procedures. He thought he knew every corner of the ancient castle, but on a cold Tuesday morning in November, everything changed. The castle was preparing for renovation work in the East Wing. Thomas received orders to inspect some old storage rooms that hadn't been opened in decades. The heavy wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open one by one. Dust particles danced in the beams of his flashlight. Most rooms contained old furniture covered in white sheets, forgotten paintings, and boxes of documents. As Thomas moved through the narrow corridor, his foot caught on something. Looking down, he noticed a loose stone in the floor. He knelt down and examined it more carefully. The stone seemed different from the others around it. When he pressed on it, it moved slightly. His curiosity grew stronger. Thomas found a small crowbar in his toolkit and carefully lifted the stone. Underneath was a metal ring, old and tarnished. He pulled on it, and to his surprise, a section of the floor lifted up like a hidden trapdoor. Below was a narrow stone staircase leading down into darkness. His heart began beating faster. In all his years at the castle, nobody had ever mentioned hidden passages or secret rooms. Thomas knew he should probably report this discovery immediately, but something urged him to explore first. He shined his flashlight down the staircase and began descending slowly. The air grew colder as he went deeper. The stone walls were damp and covered with moss. After about 20 steps, he reached the bottom. His flashlight revealed a small underground chamber, roughly the size of a bedroom. The walls were lined with stone, and the ceiling was low, forcing him to duck slightly. In the center of the room stood an ornate wooden wardrobe. It was unlike anything Thomas had seen before. The wood was dark mahogany, carved with intricate designs of roses, crowns, and royal symbols. Golden handles gleamed despite years of neglect. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly the work of master furniture makers. Thomas approached the wardrobe cautiously. His training told him not to touch anything without proper authorization, but his curiosity was overwhelming. He noticed that the wardrobe had a small brass plate at the bottom with an inscription that was barely readable through the tarnish. Wiping away years of dust and grime with his sleeve, he could make out the words Her Majesty Queen Victoria, Private Collection, 1838. Thomas felt his breath catch. This wardrobe had belonged to Queen Victoria herself, hidden away for over a century. The wardrobe had 2 large doors secured with an old-fashioned lock. Thomas examined it carefully. The keyhole was ornate, shaped like a tiny crown. He looked around the chamber for any sign of a key but found nothing. However, when he gently tested the doors, he discovered that the lock mechanism had deteriorated over time. With a soft click, the doors swung open. Inside, the wardrobe was divided into several compartments. Hanging from golden hooks were garments covered in protective cloth bags. Thomas could see the outlines of dresses, cloaks, and formal wear. On the bottom were several wooden drawers, and on the shelves above were hat boxes and jewelry cases. His flashlight illuminated a small envelope that had fallen to the floor of the wardrobe. Thomas picked it up carefully. The envelope was made of heavy cream-colored paper with the royal seal embossed on it. Written in elegant handwriting were the words, "For my successor, to be opened only in times of great need." Thomas felt the weight of history in his hands. He was holding something that Queen Victoria herself had written and hidden away. The envelope was sealed with red wax, still intact after all these years. He knew he should not open it, but the temptation was incredible. Instead, he carefully placed the envelope in his jacket pocket and began examining the garments in the wardrobe. The first item he uncovered took his breath away. Behind a protective covering was the most beautiful dress he had ever seen. It was made of deep purple velvet with intricate gold embroidery. Precious stones were sewn into the fabric, creating patterns of flowers and royal symbols. But it was the second garment that made his hands tremble. As he pulled away another cloth covering, he revealed a magnificent coronation robe. The robe was made of rich crimson velvet lined with white ermine. Golden threads formed elaborate patterns across the fabric, and hundreds of precious gems sparkled in his flashlight beam. The robe was incredibly heavy, clearly made with the finest materials available. Thomas recognized this robe from historical paintings and photographs. It was Queen Victoria's coronation robe. the one she had worn when she became Queen of England at just 18 years old. But according to historical records, this robe should have been in the Tower of London with the other crown jewels. How had it ended up hidden in a secret chamber beneath Windsor Castle? He examined the robe more closely and noticed something unusual. There were small tears in the fabric and what appeared to be bloodstains on the white ermine lining. The damage was old, clearly from many years ago. Thomas wondered what had happened to cause such damage to such a precious garment. In one of the drawers, he found a collection of personal letters tied with blue ribbon. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope he had found. These were Queen Victoria's private letters, written in her own hand. Without reading them, he could see they were addressed to various members of her family and trusted advisors. Another drawer contained jewelry that was not part of the official crown jewels. There were necklaces, bracelets, and rings that appeared to be personal gifts or family heirlooms. One necklace in particular caught his attention. It was made of black pearls with a large sapphire pendant. Attached to it was a small note that read, "From my beloved Albert, worn at our secret wedding ceremony." Historical records showed that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert had a public wedding ceremony in 1840. What was this reference to a secret wedding ceremony? Had there been events in the royal family's history that were never recorded in official documents? As he continued exploring the wardrobe, he found more mysterious items. There was a small silver box containing what appeared to be locks of hair from different people, each tied with different colored ribbons and labeled with initials. There was also a collection of small paintings, portraits of people he didn't recognize. In the very back of the wardrobe, behind all the clothing, Thomas discovered something even more intriguing. There was a hidden compartment, cleverly concealed behind a false back panel. Inside this compartment were several official-looking documents sealed with the royal seal. The documents were written in formal legal language, but Thomas could understand enough to realize they were extremely important. One appeared to be an alternative will, different from Queen Victoria's official will that was read after her death. Another document seemed to be about secret arrangements for the succession of the throne. Thomas felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of his discovery. He was holding documents that could potentially change how historians understood Queen Victoria's reign and the royal family's history. These were state secrets that had been hidden for over a century. His watch showed that he had been in the chamber for over 2 hours. Other guards would soon be wondering where he was. Thomas knew he had to make a decision. Should he report this discovery immediately, or should he investigate further on his own? The rational part of his mind told him to follow protocol and report to his superiors immediately. But another part of him, the part that had always been fascinated by history and mysteries, wanted to understand what he had found before anyone else became involved. Thomas carefully photographed several items with his phone, making sure to capture the inscriptions and any identifying marks. He took pictures of the coronation robe, the jewelry, and some of the documents, though he was careful not to disturb anything. As he prepared to leave the chamber, he noticed something he had missed earlier. On the wall behind the wardrobe was a carved stone panel with symbols and letters. It looked like some kind of code or message. The symbols were a mixture of royal crests, numbers, and letters that didn't form any obvious words. Thomas copied the symbols into his notebook, drawing each one carefully. He had a feeling this carved message might be the key to understanding why all these items had been hidden and what Queen Victoria had intended for them. Before closing the wardrobe doors, he took one last look at the magnificent coronation robe. The sight of it filled him with awe and responsibility. He was perhaps the first person to see this robe in over 100 years, and he was certainly the first to know about its secret location. Thomas climbed back up the stone staircase, his mind racing with questions. He carefully lowered the trap door and replaced the loose stone, making sure everything looked exactly as it had before his discovery. He continued his official inspection of the storage rooms, but his thoughts were entirely focused on what lay hidden beneath his feet. When he finished his rounds and returned to the security office, Thomas tried to act normal. He filed his routine inspection report, noting that the storage rooms contained only old furniture and documents. He made no mention of the hidden chamber or its incredible contents. That evening, Thomas went home to his small apartment in Windsor Village. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had discovered. He spread his photographs across his kitchen table and studied every detail. The more he looked, the more questions arose. Why had Queen Victoria hidden these items? What was the significance of the alternative will? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do with this knowledge? Thomas had always been a careful, rule-following man, but this discovery was testing all of his principles. He knew that reporting it immediately was the right thing to do, but he also knew that once he did, he would lose all control over what happened next. The items might be removed, studied by scholars, and eventually displayed in museums. The secrets they contained might never be fully revealed to the public. As he sat in his kitchen that night, Thomas made a decision that would change his life forever. He would investigate this mystery himself, at least for a few days, before reporting it. He wanted to understand what Queen Victoria had intended, and why she had gone to such lengths to hide these treasures. Little did Thomas know that his decision to explore the mystery on his own would lead him into a web of royal secrets, historical cover-ups, and dangerous political implications that stretched far beyond anything he could have imagined. The next morning, Thomas woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He had spent most of the night researching Queen Victoria's history online, looking for any clues that might help him understand his discovery. What he found only deepened the mystery. According to official records, Queen Victoria's coronation robe was indeed kept at the Tower of London. Museum websites showed photographs of what they claimed was her original coronation robe, but when Thomas compared those images to his own photographs, he noticed significant differences. The robe in the tower had different embroidery patterns and seemed to be made of lighter materials. This revelation was staggering. Either the Tower of London was displaying a replica, or Thomas had discovered the real coronation robe while another version was being shown to the public. But why would there be two robes, and why would the real one be hidden away? Thomas decided to use his lunch break to visit the Windsor Castle Library. As a castle employee, he had access to historical archives that weren't available to the general public. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Henderson, had worked at the castle for 30 years and knew more about royal history than most university professors. "I'm researching Queen Victoria's personal belongings," Thomas told her casually, "particularly items that might have been stored here at Windsor rather than moved to other locations." Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with interest. She loved helping people research castle history. She led Thomas to a section filled with old inventory books and storage records dating back to the 1800s. "These books record everything that was moved in and out of the castle," she explained. "If Queen Victoria stored personal items here, there should be some record of it." Thomas spent his lunch hour carefully going through the old inventory books. Most entries were routine. Furniture moved between rooms, artwork relocated, basic household items cataloged. But as he reached the records from late 1900, shortly before Queen Victoria's death, he found something interesting. There was an entry dated December 15, 1900, just 3 weeks before the Queen's death. It read, "Personal items relocated to secure storage by Her Majesty's direct order. Location, East Wing basement level. Access restricted to Her Majesty and designated successor only." The entry was signed by someone with the initials JB and countersigned by what appeared to be Queen Victoria's own signature, though it was shaky and weak, clearly written by someone in poor health. Thomas felt his pulse quicken. This was proof that Queen Victoria herself had ordered items to be hidden in the castle basement. But who was JB, and what did the reference to a designated successor mean? He continued searching through the records and found more clues. There were several entries in early 1901, after Victoria's death, noting visits to the secure storage area by someone identified only as ER. These visits continued sporadically until 1910, then stopped completely. Thomas realized he needed more information about the royal family's history during this period. He asked Mrs. Henderson if there were any personal records or correspondence from Queen Victoria's final years. "There are some private papers," she said thoughtfully, "but they're in the restricted archive. You'd need special permission to access those." Thomas knew he couldn't request special permission without raising questions about why he needed it. But Mrs. Henderson seemed to trust him, and he decided to take a risk. "I'm actually working on a security review of historical storage areas," he said, stretching the truth. "My supervisor asked me to research what items might still be stored in old parts of the castle that we should be aware of for security purposes." Mrs. Henderson considered this for a moment. "Well, I suppose that makes sense. The castle does have many forgotten storage areas." She led him to a locked cabinet and retrieved a key from her desk. These are Queen Victoria's private correspondence files from her final years. Please be very careful with them. Thomas opened the files with trembling hands. Inside were hundreds of letters, both sent and received by Queen Victoria during the last decade of her life. Began reading through them, looking for any mention of hidden storage or secret arrangements. Most of the letters were routine royal business or personal correspondence with family members. But as he dug deeper, he found a series of letters that made him sit up straight. The letters were exchanges between Queen Victoria and someone she referred to as my trusted guardian, JB. The content of these letters was shocking. They discussed concerns about political stability, threats to the monarchy, and the need to preserve certain vital documents and symbols of the crown in case of emergency. One letter, dated November 1900, was particularly revealing. Queen Victoria wrote, "The robe must be preserved in its original state, away from public display. Too many questions have been raised about the damage it sustained during the incident in '38. The replica serves its purpose for ceremonial functions, but the true robe carries secrets that must not be exposed until the time is right." Thomas read this passage several times. What incident in 1838? That was the year Queen Victoria was coronated. Had something happened during her coronation that was covered up? And what secrets did the robe carry? He found another letter from December 19 that provided more pieces of the puzzle. E.R. has been instructed on the location and the conditions under which the collection may be accessed. The sealed envelope contains instructions that must be followed precisely. Only in times of great threat to the monarchy should these items see daylight again. Thomas realized that E.R. likely referred to Edward Rex, King Edward VII, who became king after Victoria's death. So Victoria had told her son about the hidden collection, but had given him specific conditions about when it could be accessed. As Thomas continued reading, he found references to other hidden items. Victoria had apparently concealed not just her coronation robe, but also documents that could alter the succession, jewelry with dangerous associations, and letters that revealed the true circumstances of various royal deaths. The more Thomas learned, the more he realized he had stumbled upon something far more significant than valuable antiques. He had discovered evidence of royal secrets that had been deliberately hidden for over a century. That evening, Thomas returned to the hidden chamber. He was more careful this time, making sure he wasn't followed and taking a more powerful flashlight. He wanted to examine the documents he had found more closely. Back in the underground room, Thomas carefully removed the sealed documents from their hidden compartment. Using his flashlight and a magnifying glass he had brought, he began reading them more thoroughly. The first document was indeed an alternative will, written in Queen Victoria's hand. It was dated just 1 week before her death and contained provisions that were completely different from her official will. This secret will mentioned the restoration of items to their rightful heirs and the revelation of truths long concealed for the protection of the realm. Most shocking was a section that read, "Should evidence emerge of threats to the rightful succession, the contents of the secured collection shall serve as proof of legitimacy and expose any who would corrupt the crown through false claims or hidden alliances." Thomas didn't fully understand the legal implications, but it sounded like Queen Victoria had left behind evidence that could be used to challenge the royal succession if necessary. But who were the rightful heirs she mentioned, and what false claims was she worried about? The second document was a detailed account of events from June 1838, shortly after Victoria's coronation. Thomas read it with growing amazement. According to this account, there had been an assassination attempt during a private ceremony at Westminster Abbey. The coronation robe had been damaged when Victoria was struck by debris from a small explosion. The attack had been quickly covered up to avoid causing panic or political instability. The perpetrators had been secretly arrested and dealt with, and a replica robe had been hastily created to replace the damaged original for all future public appearances. But the most startling revelation was the identity of the person behind the assassination attempt. According to the document, it had been organized by someone within the royal court, a cousin of Victoria, who believed he had a stronger claim to the throne. Thomas sat in the underground chamber, surrounded by these explosive secrets, trying to process what he had learned. Queen Victoria had survived an assassination attempt that was covered up by the government. The coronation robe everyone thought was authentic was actually a replica. And somewhere in the royal family tree, there might be people with legitimate claims to the throne that had been suppressed for over a century. He examined the bloodstains on the Coronation Robe with new understanding. This wasn't just a historical artifact. It was evidence of a crime and a cover-up at the highest levels of government. Thomas picked up the sealed envelope he had found initially and finally broke the wax seal. Inside was a letter addressed simply, "To my successor." The letter was written in Queen Victoria's distinctive handwriting and dated December 22, 1900. The letter read, "If you are reading this, then circumstances have arisen that require the truth to be known. The items in this collection are not mere treasures but evidence of threats to our monarchy that have been concealed to preserve stability. The damaged robe proves the attack of 1838. The documents reveal the conspiracy that continues to this day. The jewelry contains evidence of poison attempts on multiple occasions. Use this knowledge wisely, but use it if the crown is ever again threatened by those who would claim what is not rightfully theirs." The letter was signed with Victoria's full royal signature and sealed with her personal seal. Thomas felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders. He was not just a security guard anymore. He was the keeper of royal secrets that could potentially reshape British history. The question was, what was he supposed to do with this knowledge? Over the next several days, Thomas continued his research while maintaining his normal work routine. He visited the chamber every evening, studying the documents and trying to understand their full implications. He also began researching the current royal family tree, looking for anyone who might have connections to the historical claims mentioned in Victoria's documents. What he discovered troubled him greatly. There were indeed several branches of the royal family that had been marginalized over the years, their claims to titles and positions quietly dismissed or ignored. Some of these families had been involved in recent political movements that questioned the legitimacy of the current monarchy. Thomas began to wonder if Queen Victoria's fears about threats to the rightful succession were still relevant today. Were there people who knew about these hidden claims and were waiting for the right moment to reveal them? Or were there others who would do anything to keep these secrets buried forever? As he delved deeper into the mystery, Thomas started noticing things that made him uneasy. His supervisor had begun asking questions about his research activities in the library. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that someone else had been asking about the same historical records he had been studying, and he was sure that someone had been following him on his way home from work. Thomas realized that his investigation had not gone unnoticed. Someone else knew what he was doing, and they might also know what he had found. The question was, were they trying to help him uncover the truth, or were they trying to stop him from revealing secrets that were meant to stay hidden? One evening, as Thomas prepared to visit the hidden chamber again, he found a note slipped under his apartment door. The note was written on expensive paper and contained just one line. "Some secrets are buried for good reason. Stop digging before you get hurt." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. His investigation had clearly attracted the attention of people who had the power and motivation to keep Queen Victoria's secrets hidden. But he had gone too far to turn back now. He needed to understand the full truth, not just for his own curiosity, but because he sensed that these secrets might be relevant to current events in ways he didn't yet understand. The next evening, Thomas made a decision that would change everything. Instead of visiting the chamber alone, he decided it was time to find someone he could trust to help him. But choosing the wrong person could put both of them in danger and could result in the secrets being buried forever. Thomas spent the night considering his options, knowing that his next decision would determine not only his own fate, but possibly the fate of the British monarchy itself. Thomas knew he needed help, but choosing the right person was crucial. After much consideration, he decided to contact Dr. Sarah Williams, a historian from Oxford University who specialized in Victorian royal history. He had seen her interviewed on television several times, and she seemed like someone who valued historical truth over political convenience. Thomas called Dr. Williams and arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe in Oxford. He told her he had discovered some historical documents at Windsor Castle that needed expert analysis, but he didn't reveal the full extent of his findings over the phone. When they met, Dr. Williams was a woman in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an obvious passion for her subject. Thomas carefully explained his discovery, showing her some of the photographs he had taken. Her reaction was immediate and intense. "My God," she whispered, studying the images of Queen Victoria's letters. "These are authentic. I can tell from the handwriting and the paper, but the contents This contradicts everything we thought we knew about Victoria's final years. Thomas decided to trust her completely. He told her about the hidden chamber, the damaged coronation robe, and the documents suggesting a conspiracy and cover-up. Dr. Williams listened with growing excitement and concern. "Thomas, do you realize what you found?" she said. "This isn't just historical treasure. This is evidence of events that could change how we understand the entire modern monarchy. But it's also extremely dangerous information." Dr. Williams explained that there were powerful people who had spent generations maintaining certain versions of royal history. If Thomas's discoveries became public, it could destabilize not just historical records, but current political structures as well. "We need to document everything properly before we decide what to do," she said. "But we also need to be very careful about who else finds out." That evening, Dr. Williams accompanied Thomas to Windsor Castle. Using her academic credentials, she had arranged for after-hours access to conduct historical research. Thomas led her through the castle corridors and down into the hidden chamber. Dr. Williams's expertise proved invaluable. She was able to authenticate the documents using techniques Thomas didn't know about, confirming that everything was genuine. She also recognized references and connections that Thomas had missed. "This alternative will," she said, studying the document carefully, "mentions the Clarence claim. That refers to a branch of the royal family that was excluded from succession in the 1800s due to political reasons, not legal ones. If Victoria believed their claim was legitimate, it could mean the current royal line has been occupying the throne under false pretenses for over a century." Dr. Williams also identified the significance of the jewelry Thomas had found. "These pieces belong to various European royal families. If they're here, it means Victoria had evidence of connections between the British monarchy and foreign powers that were never officially acknowledged." As they examined the carved symbols on the chamber wall, Dr. Williams made another breakthrough. "This isn't just decoration," she said. "It's a code. See these numbers and letters? They correspond to locations in other royal residences. Victoria created a map to additional hidden collections. The symbols, when decoded, pointed to secret storage areas in Balmoral Castle in Scotland, Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, and even a location in Buckingham Palace itself. Queen Victoria had hidden evidence and artifacts in multiple locations, creating a network of royal secrets that spanned the entire kingdom. Over the next week, Thomas and Dr. Peckinbach Williams worked together to decode all the symbols and understand the full scope of Victoria's hidden legacy. They discovered that the Queen had been far more politically savvy and suspicious than history recorded. She had collected evidence of various plots against the monarchy, maintained detailed records of foreign interference in British politics, and preserved proof of legitimate claims to royal titles that had been suppressed. But their investigation was interrupted by an unexpected development. One morning, Thomas arrived at work to find his supervisor waiting for him with a serious expression. "Thomas, we need to talk," his supervisor said. "There have been reports of unauthorized access to restricted areas of the castle. Security cameras have recorded someone entering storage areas that are supposed to be sealed." Thomas's heart raced, but he tried to remain calm. "I've been conducting the storage room inspections as ordered, sir. Perhaps the cameras captured me doing my regular duties." This supervisor studied him carefully. "Perhaps. But we've also received inquiries from certain government offices about any recent discoveries of historical materials. They seem very interested in making sure that any such discoveries are reported immediately through proper channels." Thomas realized that word of his investigation had somehow reached people in positions of power. Someone was watching, and they wanted to make sure that any secrets Victoria had hidden would remain hidden. That evening, Thomas met with Dr. Williams to discuss this development. She had also received some troubling news. "I've been contacted by colleagues warning me about my recent research," she said. "Apparently, there are people in the government who monitor anyone investigating certain aspects of royal history. We may have triggered some kind of alert system." Williams had been thinking about the implications of their discoveries. "Thomas, I believe Queen Victoria hid these items not just to preserve them, but because she expected someone to eventually find them. The letter you found mentioned times of great need. I think she foresaw circumstances where these secrets would need to be revealed." They discussed the current political climate. The monarchy was facing challenges from various directions: Republican movements questioning its relevance, financial scandals involving royal family members, and ongoing debates about the legitimacy of inherited power in modern society. Maybe this is the time Victoria was referring to, Dr. Williams suggested. Maybe these secrets need to come to light now. But they also faced a dilemma. Revealing the secrets could cause massive political upheaval and potentially destabilize the government. On the other hand, keeping them hidden meant perpetuating historical lies and denying justice to people whose legitimate claims had been suppressed. Thomas and Dr. Williams decided they needed more time to think before taking any action. But their time was running out. The next day, Thomas received a phone call at work that changed everything. The caller identified himself as Mr. Smileykiss, James Pemberton, a representative of the Cabinet Office. He spoke in a calm, authoritative voice that somehow managed to be both polite and threatening. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you've been conducting some interesting historical research at Windsor Castle. I think it would be beneficial for all parties if we could arrange a meeting to discuss your findings. Thomas tried to play innocent. I'm not sure what you're referring to, sir. I just do routine security work. Of course, Mr. Pemberton replied smoothly. Nevertheless, I think a conversation would be productive. Shall we say tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock? I'll meet you at your office at the castle. After the call ended, Thomas immediately contacted Dr. Williams. They both realized that the government was now directly involved. They had until the next afternoon to decide what to do with their discoveries. That night, they met at the hidden chamber one last time. Dr. Williams had brought professional photography equipment and spent hours documenting every item in detail. They also made copies of all the important documents. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, we need to ensure this information survives. History has a right to know the truth. They discussed various options. They could turn everything over to the government and let them decide what to do with it. They could contact journalists and make the discoveries public. They could approach members of Parliament or other political figures, or they could find a way to preserve the information while keeping it secret until a more opportune time. In the end, they chose a combination approach. Dr. Williams would secure copies of all the evidence in her university archive, protected by academic freedom laws. Thomas would meet with Mr. Pemberton and gauge the government's intentions. Depending on how that meeting went, they would decide whether to go public or negotiate some kind of compromise. The next afternoon, Mr. Pemberton arrived at Windsor Castle precisely at 3 o'clock. He was a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit who carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to wielding power behind the scenes. Mr. Mitchell, he said, shaking Thomas's hand, I believe you've made some discoveries that have significant implications for national security and historical accuracy. Thomas was surprised by Pemberton's direct approach. How did you know about my discoveries? The government has been aware of Queen Victoria's hidden collections for many decades, Pemberton replied. We've been waiting for someone to eventually find them. The question now is what to do about it. Pemberton explained that the government had known about the existence of Victoria's secret documents since the 1950s, but had never been able to locate them. They had decided it was safer to leave them hidden rather than actively search for them. Queen Victoria was a remarkable woman, Pemberton continued. She understood that some truths are too dangerous to reveal immediately, but too important to lose forever. She created a system where these secrets would only be discovered when someone had the persistence and integrity to properly investigate. Thomas realized he was being tested. What do you want from me? The government would like to propose a solution that serves everyone's interests, Pemberton said. Dr. Williams has already been contacted with a similar offer. We're prepared to establish a special historical commission to study these discoveries and determine how and when they should be revealed to the public. The offer was tempting but complicated. Thomas and Dr. Williams would be appointed to this commission, along with other historians and government representatives. They would have access to additional royal archives and resources to complete their research, but they would also be bound by official secrecy laws until the commission completed its work. How long would this process take? Thomas asked. That depends on what else we find, Pemberton replied, but probably several years. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond British history. They involve international relations, current political situations, and the stability of democratic institutions. Thomas asked for time to consider the offer and discuss it with Dr. Williams. Pemberton agreed but emphasized that time was limited. Other parties are also interested in these discoveries, he said ominously. Not all of them have the government's restraint or respect for proper procedures. That evening, Thomas and Dr. Williams met to discuss Pemberton's offer. They both recognized that it was probably the best opportunity they would get to properly study and eventually reveal Victoria's secrets. But they also worried about government control and potential censorship. At least this way, the information will be preserved and studied properly, Dr. Williams argued. If we try to go public immediately, the government could classify everything and we'd lose all access. Thomas agreed, but with conditions. They would join the commission only if they could maintain copies of their original research and if there was a guaranteed timeline for public disclosure, even if it was partial. The next day, they contacted Pemberton and accepted the offer with their conditions. To their surprise, he agreed readily. The government has no interest in suppressing historical truth indefinitely, he assured them. We simply want to ensure that any revelations are handled responsibly and with consideration for their broader implications. Over the following months, Thomas found himself living a double life. Officially, he remained a security guard at Windsor Castle, but he also became a member of a classified historical research commission. The work was fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. The commission had access to government archives that revealed the true scope of royal secrets. Victoria's discoveries were just the tip of the iceberg. There were hidden histories involving multiple monarchs, secret treaties with foreign powers, suppressed evidence of royal family scandals, and documentation of government cover-ups spanning several centuries. Thomas learned that the British monarchy had survived numerous threats and conspiracies that were never recorded in official histories. Queen Victoria had been remarkably prescient in preserving evidence of these events, creating an insurance policy for future generations. The commission also discovered that several of the lost royal claimants mentioned in Victoria's documents were indeed legitimate, and that their modern descendants had been systematically excluded from their rightful positions and inheritances. This revelation had profound implications for current members of the royal family and the legal foundations of the monarchy. After 2 years of research, the commission published its first report. The document was carefully crafted to reveal important historical truths while avoiding immediate political upheaval. It confirmed that Queen Victoria's coronation robe at the Tower of London was indeed a replica, and that the real robe had been damaged during a previously unknown security incident. The report also acknowledged that there were legitimate questions about certain aspects of royal succession that merited further investigation. It recommended the establishment of a permanent royal historical review body to examine these issues and provide recommendations for addressing historical injustices. Public reaction to the report was intense, but mixed. Historians and academics praised the revelations as groundbreaking discoveries that enhanced understanding of Victorian-era politics. Republican groups seized on the evidence of royal secrets and cover-ups as proof that the monarchy couldn't be trusted with power. Monarchist organizations argued that the discoveries proved the royal family's dedication to protecting British stability even at personal cost. Thomas found himself unexpectedly famous. Interviewed by newspapers and television programs about his role in the discoveries, he handled the attention carefully, always emphasizing the historical significance of the findings rather than their political implications. Williams became one of the leading experts on the newly revealed royal history, publishing academic papers and books about Queen Victoria's political sophistication and foresight. She also worked with the royal family to establish new protocols for preserving and eventually revealing historical materials that might still be hidden in royal residences. The commission's work continued, with new discoveries emerging regularly. They found evidence of additional hidden chambers in Buckingham Palace and Balmoral Castle, containing more documents and artifacts that filled gaps in historical records. Each discovery added new pieces to the puzzle of royal history and British political development. Thomas reflected on how much his life had changed since that morning when he discovered the loose stone in the castle floor. He had gone from being a simple security guard to being a guardian of royal secrets and historical truth. The responsibility was enormous, but he felt honored to play a role in preserving and revealing important aspects of British heritage. 5 years after his initial discovery, Thomas published his own book about the experience, titled The Queen's Secret: A Guard's Journey into Hidden Royal History. The book became a bestseller, combining historical revelation with personal narrative in a way that made the complex political implications accessible to general readers. In his conclusion, Thomas wrote, "Queen Victoria understood something that we're only beginning to appreciate today. that truth and power don't always align, but that democracy requires both to eventually converge. By hiding these secrets with the intention that they would someday be found, she created a time capsule of accountability that speaks across centuries. The real treasure wasn't the gold and jewels in that hidden chamber, but the reminder that even the most powerful institutions must eventually answer to history and truth. The discoveries at Windsor Castle ultimately led to broader reforms in how historical records are preserved and revealed. The government established new guidelines requiring periodic review of classified historical materials, ensuring that important discoveries wouldn't remain hidden indefinitely. The royal family also embraced greater transparency about their historical role, acknowledging past mistakes while demonstrating their commitment to serving the modern British people with honesty and accountability. Thomas continued working at Windsor Castle, but with a new title, Director of Historical Preservation. His job now involved working with historians, archaeologists, and government officials to ensure that the castle's secrets were properly preserved and eventually shared with the public. Looking back, Thomas realized that Queen Victoria had indeed been waiting for someone like him, not necessarily someone with special qualifications or connections, but someone with the curiosity to investigate mysteries and the integrity to handle difficult truths responsibly. The hidden wardrobe and its contents had revealed far more than royal treasures. They had demonstrated that democracy depends on citizens who are willing to ask difficult questions, seek uncomfortable truths, and take responsibility for preserving important information for future generations. As Thomas walked through Windsor Castle each day, he knew that there were probably more secrets waiting to be discovered. But he also knew that the systems were now in place to ensure that when those discoveries were made, they would be handled with the care and respect that history and the future deserved.